Good evening. Thank you very much for that introduction, Professor Haslick. I want to thank the Show Me Institute and St. Louis University for having me, and to thank all of you for coming. The goal of my remarks this evening is to provide an assessment of the economic policies that the Obama administration has pursued in the last year and a couple of months. Okay? To do that, I want to start with an observation. Okay? When President Obama took office, he was in an unusual situation. He obviously faced a bad economy. I don't think it was nearly as bad as the administration suggested. I don't think we were on the verge of another Great Depression, but it certainly was a serious recession, worse than just about any others in the post-World War II period. Okay? At the same time, President Obama faced very high expectations. There was a view, pretty widely held, that somehow he had a magic wand, that he was going to be able to accomplish things that many other politicians had not been able to accomplish. He entered office with a huge amount of hope and trust, obviously from Democrats, from liberals, but much more broadly than that. Lots of independents voted for him. Lots of independents thought that this was a person who was impressive, a person who might really make a difference for the country's future. And of course, he also entered office with a strongly Democratic Congress, a much greater majority in both houses than just about any other president has enjoyed in recent memory. So in all these respects, he faced a bit of a unique starting point. Now, the bad economy, the high expectations, you can of course think of as a bit of a burden or a challenge. If everybody expects miracles, then it's pretty likely you're going to fail no matter how well you do. At the same time, the hope and the trust and the Democratic majority provided an opportunity. It meant that he might be able to do some things that hadn't been done before. So the question was, how was the president going to use this unusual situation? And there were basically two possibilities. One option would have been to choose a range of policies to at least advocate for a set of things that most people sort of recognize are necessary, but nobody wants to speak in favor of. At least no one who ever wants to get elected to public office again. So the obvious example is slowing the growth of entitlement spending in the US, slowing the growth of spending on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Many Democrats, no matter what they say in front of the microphones, realize that something needs to be done about those programs or they will eat the entire budget. But none of them wants to stand up and advocate for that. But Obama was in a somewhat unique position. Maybe he, sort of more than anyone else, had a chance to say, look, it's time to pay the piper. I'm going to take one for the team. I'm going to rise above partisanship, and I'm going to advocate slowing the growth of those programs. A second option, of course, was for President Obama and the Democratic Congress to use their unusual situation, in particular the trust and support as well as the strong majority, to ram through whatever policies they thought were desirable from the perspective of their constituents, without much regard for whether these were beneficial for the overall economy. In the language of my title, the title of my talk, they could have chosen to emphasize growth, to emphasize growing the economic pie, producing more stuff, making the economy more productive and efficient, or they could have emphasized dividing the pie, redistribution, not necessarily just redistribution from high income to low income, but redistribution to favored Democratic interest groups, because perhaps that helps you get reelected the next time around. My claim, my main argument is that the administration has chosen the latter option. It is focused almost exclusively on redistribution, on paying off its base, not on doing policies, enacting policies that would have expanded the economy, promoted a faster growth rate, and given us a better economic situation going forward. Of course, the administration has typically, almost always, tried to dress up their policies as being about making things more efficient. They've tried to argue that their vision of policy will make it better, will make it more efficient, will get bigger bang for the buck, will give everybody more of something without anyone feeling any pain. In a few cases, they have reasoned, although I don't think compelling, arguments that some of their policies might make sense from a productivity, efficiency perspective. But overall, I want to argue that they have systematically chosen redistribution over economic growth, over economic productivity. And this applies whether we're talking about the stimulus, about Obamacare, about housing policy, about the auto bailouts, about banks, about cap and trade, and so on and so forth. That is, the choices demonstrate a consistent tilt toward redistribution over growth. I'm going to try to make this case by talking about some specific policies. I will mainly focus on the stimulus, partially because that's the single biggest policy that actually has been enacted. Many of the other things the administration has advocated for, okay, are still sort of on the drawing board at one level or another, are still languishing in Congress, to be more specific. But I'll also talk about a number of these other things that the administration has endorsed, even if they haven't yet become law. And then I want to talk about what I think the U.S.'s economic future looks like, okay, given my conclusions about the way the Obama administration has conducted business for at least the first part of their term. So the first policy worth discussing is the fiscal stimulus. It's about $800 billion, give or take $100 billion. You know, as Everett Dirksen said, $100 billion here, there. Soon you're talking about real money. Okay? When Obama took office, the U.S. was in a serious recession. Monetary policy had done pretty much everything that most economists thought it could do. So it was not unreasonable to discuss fiscal policy, even though fiscal policy has sort of been ignored by macroeconomists for a good 15, 20 years. But it was certainly a reasonable thing to discuss. It was certainly a totally sensible thing to worry whether government could do something to help end the recession faster rather than slower. So let's talk about the stimulus, okay? And first let's just ask, what exactly is a fiscal stimulus? It's an idea due to John Maynard Keynes, a famous British economist, wrote roughly in the first half of the 20th century. And it means one of two things. It means either that the government expands its purchases, okay, its spending, more roads, more military expenditure, more education spending, and so on. Or it means that the government cuts taxes, okay, so that individuals have more disposable income, or corporations and other business firms have more after-tax cash flow that they can use to spend on whatever they wish. And the idea in both cases is basically the same. The idea is that when either the government buys more stuff from the private sector, or individuals and firms get to keep more of their income because they pay less in taxes, they'll take some of that, okay, and they'll buy stuff with it. And when they buy stuff with it, that will be extra income to the people who sold it. Okay, and those people who sold the new toaster ovens to the people who just got a tax rebate or a tax cut will turn around and use some of their extra profit to buy some goods and services for themselves. And then those people will have a little bit of extra income, so you get what's known as a multiplier effect. This initial injection into the economy by the federal government in the form of either more purchases of goods and services or lower taxes multiplies through the economy and leads to the stimulation of the private production of goods and services throughout the economy and giving you more than one for one, giving you more back in terms of extra output than the extra amount that the government spent or the amount that the government cut in taxes. So what you can obviously see is that before you decide for sure that you're doing a fiscal stimulus, you have to decide, well, exactly what kind of fiscal stimulus. Is it going to be a tax cut? Is it going to be a spending increase? Is it some of both? Does it matter what kind of spending or what kind of tax cut? And so on. It turns out that in the Keynesian logic, if you take it literally, if you read any introductory textbook written by any economist from the most conservative to the most liberal, they basically all say exactly the same thing on this point. They say it doesn't matter at all. They say that any kind of extra spending by the government stimulates the economy, and any kind of tax cuts, by putting more disposable income in the hands of businesses and firms, help stimulate the economy. So if that's true, then quibbling over exactly how we spent the stimulus money, quibbling over which tax to cut or whether to do spending or cutting taxes, is kind of a waste of time, because if the Keynesian model is literally right, anything you do in either of those two categories is useful. So when you see stories on CNN or Fox News or wherever about some really insane thing that the fiscal stimulus is going for, the most recent one I saw was for yoga lessons in Massachusetts. Okay? That makes sense in the Keynesian logic, because those yoga instructors got a little bit more income from the federal government, and therefore those yoga instructors are going to buy more groceries or get a slightly more expensive apartment or buy a new toaster oven, and then the people who sell toaster ovens have a little bit more income, and that will multiply through the economy. So under the strict Keynesian logic, it really makes no difference. All the Fox News horror stories about the silly things the stimulus might have been spent on are actually irrelevant if you accept the pure Keynesian logic. Okay? What I want to argue is that there's a lot more to it than that, and that we should care very deeply, okay, what we put into a fiscal stimulus, whether it's taxes versus spending, okay, and what kind of taxes versus spending.